You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. How is wet wood related to our self-worth? Join me for today's thought-provoking episode. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer. What if everything we've been told about holistic health, healing, and well-being is only part of the story? Because thriving in today's world looks different than it used to. Here, we challenge the narratives, rethink what it means to become human, and explore how that shapes the way we lead, live, and step into our full potential. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. What is it about certain relationships that stays with us long after we have stopped thinking about them? The body seems to know the answer even when we do not. And that gap between what we feel and what we understand can create profound challenges for us. Hayley Enright works with people who know they don't quite fit in, who know they weren't meant for a cookie-cutter life. They are wired differently, whether they're neurodivergent, highly sensitive, or just quite original. And while that's their greatest blessing, it requires a specific kind of support to keep their battery from being drained by a world and by relationships that don't quite fit their frequency. She helps them come home to themselves and say a definitive yes to their own magic. As a nervous system and energy recalibration specialist with over 16,000 treatments under her belt, she has seen how unresolved relationship dynamics can act as a silent leak in the system. With 3 master's degrees and a background as an acupuncturist who has opened 4 studios in 3 countries, she blends ancient Taoist wisdom with modern energetic insight to help offload weight and stop the stagnation. Here is my interview with Hayley Enright. Before we begin today's episode, we have a special invitation for you. Right now, you can go online and find 10 completely different ways of approaching health, healing, and well-being. One person talks about the body, another talks about energy, and someone else is focused on mindset hacks or relationships. And most of the time, those conversations never weave together. We are bringing together over 60 speakers across holistic well-being, including mind, body, emotions, energy, human potential, wealth, leadership, relationships, and more to explore what it means to truly thrive in this world. Join us for the Holistic Wellbeing Summit from June 8th to 14th with speaker sessions and exciting live events. Get your free ticket now at holisticwellbeingsummit.com. And now, back to today's episode. Hi, Hayley. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because we are going to be talking about what unresolved relationship can do to our nervous system. And I'm very curious about that because, of course, we all have relationships in our lives that we have to deal with in one way or another. So I'm glad you're here to join me today to talk about that. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Petra. It's great to be here and to speak with you too. I've really been looking forward to this as well.
Yeah, me too. And I feel relationships are such a common thing that generally we all have some kind of relationship in our lives, whether that be personal or intimate or work relationships or colleagues and friends. And of course, this touches on nearly every aspect of our lives. So I'm glad you're here to share more about that and give us some more insight. And for starters, would you like to share a little bit about your own story and your own journey and maybe the parts of it that you feel connect to what you do today, and also share with our listeners what it is that you do today?
Yeah, no problem. So I'm a nervous system regulation specialist. My modalities are energy work and acupuncture. I've given more than 16,000 treatments. I've opened 4 studios in 3 countries. I have 2 master's degrees in acupuncture. And as I tell everybody, I have the best job in the world. I love what I do so much. It is such a pleasure and a blessing to work with people because, you know, what happens when we work on ourselves, this is how we uplift not only us, but also our community, the people around us, and the world in general. So if we want to live in a future we're excited about, it starts with us.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So we do the work for ourselves first and then ripple that out into the world. I love that idea. And of course, you and I have spent a little bit of time together doing work together as well. And I very much enjoyed that. I can only share that piece of how powerful that can be when we start that work on ourselves. And I'm glad that you offer that to all of our beautiful human souls out there. And how do relationships figure into the work that you do, Hayley? Because as I said before, I feel like this really concerns everybody on this planet because we have relationships in one way or another. So how does this connect to the work that you do?
Yeah, exactly. We really are communal animals, and this doesn't change in our lives. We're designed to receive input from each other. We need input from each other. We need each other to act as mirrors for ourselves so that we can see how we are, what it is we're doing. Like, we're not designed to exist in a vacuum. And so relationships give us this information that we need to grow. So the better we are at being in relationship, whether it's with a partner, whether it's with a family member, whether it's with the people at work, no matter the relationship, the better we are at it, the more expansive we can be in our own lives. Our nervous systems really use a lot of energy to process relationship because they're designed to. And so when we want that to be in a good state, it behooves us to be in good relationships, not only with ourselves, but also with other people.
I can definitely see that because some relationships are very stressful, take a lot of our energy. There's this immediate impact sometimes when we even just see another person that we, for example, don't get along with or have conflict with. So I can definitely see how that affects us right away. Even a lot of people say that they have challenges in relationships. Maybe they're not good communicators or there are some things that they're in conflict about. How does this happen that we are often so challenged with having good relationships? Where does that come from? And I know a lot of us will point to childhood because that's always where we point to. But in your work and what you have found, why is it so difficult for us to often have good relationships?
Yeah, the patterning that we pick up early in life really becomes something that the nervous system takes in, and then we stop thinking about it, right? A lot of the challenges we experience in relationships are coming from mechanisms we're enacting that we're not necessarily conscious of. It's not in the forefront of our thoughts. So those are really hard to shift because we're not used to looking at them. And we all have those. That's totally normal. I think it becomes interesting when we recognize that we have the power to shift what it is we're doing. And when we take a look inside, when we start to come into a relationship with ourselves, because this is the first relationship, right? The way that we experience ourselves is the way that we experience the world around us, the people around us. Coming into relationship with that really is a great way to start to regulate how the nervous system responds to the people around you and to yourself.
That's a really good point, and maybe something we don't often think about because we were all born of our mothers. So maybe we think of our first relationship as being that with our mother, for example. But it's so interesting to think about this relationship with ourselves. Of course, we were this tiny little thing in a womb, and that was our first relationship coming to actually be in this world. So it makes sense to start there and start looking at that. Now, how can we actually start becoming aware of that? I feel there might be a tendency to look always externally at, oh, I don't get along with this person, or I have conflict here, or this person always feels like they're telling me what to do, or I can't be myself with this person. So how do we come to ourselves and actually start from that perspective of our own relationship?
Oh, that is a great question. And there's a lot of layers to it, actually. In order to start looking within, it's good to practice some patience, some kindness to yourself, some compassion, some recognition that maybe you're not good at everything you want to be good at yet. And that is totally okay. We're not here to be perfect. We're here to learn how to step into our power, our authenticity, our truth, our excitement, our pleasure for life. And that can be a journey. So in order to do that, there's so many ways you can begin. Oftentimes it can be a really soft, subtle thing. You take a few minutes for yourself in the morning. You make a little inquiry into your system. You just check in with yourself and you notice how you're feeling. Usually the first step is noticing yourself.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I think that awareness that we're building is a big part of actually coming back to that relationship. Maybe we become really busy in our lives and we get distracted from that on many layers, and coming back to that in a mindful way, I think is wonderful. And how do these relationships that we process every single day, really almost every minute of the day, and of course also that relationship with ourselves, how does that connect back to our nervous system? And how does our nervous system, I want to say, manage all of these different relationships? And how can we support it in that process? Because sometimes that's where the bottom falls out to start with. So how does that all connect together in your work and your experience?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Working through the nervous system is a really interesting way to address this, because imagine your nervous system is like a computer. It's a high-end computer with a lot of capacity, a lot of power, a strong battery. An unresolved relationship is a little bit like a program you're running that, you forgot about. It's in the background and you don't necessarily notice it, right? You may not be actively thinking about the problems with the relationship or the unresolved anger or the hurt or the guilt that you experience around it. But that program is running in the background, which means it is using up your battery. It's using the resources that you would otherwise use for your present moment in your day-to-day life. And so the nervous system is very good at holding patterns, which is a great aspect of it. Imagine if you had to relearn how to use a fork every time you wanted to eat. Oh my gosh, how frustrating would that be? But you already know the pattern of how to get the food into your mouth. It's easy. You don't have to think about it. But if there's this program running of an unresolved relationship, your nervous system is definitely aware of it. It's definitely going to stay active to manage that. And that really creates kind of a state of alert. So what happens is you end up staying in the pattern of alert. And that means all of the decisions, all of the choices you make during your day are coming from the state of alertness instead of a state of relaxation or regulation.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that there probably are some not so pretty consequences to being in this activated state all the time, because we are draining our resources. And that, of course, has effects on our well-being, on mental, emotional, physical, and even energetic levels, I would think, since that's also part of what you work with. How does this state of being in activation affect us across our relationships and in our lives? What have you seen in your work on how that tends to show up for people in their own lives when they're not regulated, when they are challenged with being in this state of high activation most of the time?
Yeah, very interesting question, because what this does, living in this particular pattern, which is not your true or authentic pattern, it really shapes how you perceive all other kinds of information. So your words, your choices, and even what you think is possible, your ideas about what is possible get affected by this. So what happens is the energy that's available to you to live in your present day, it's less. Your battery's a little bit drained. Therefore, people end up making choices that don't quite suit them. It's not necessarily a big, you jumped off the cliff and that was a bad idea. It could just be like, oh, well, I decided to eat this food right then, which I know makes me feel bloated and foggy later. Or, oh, I shouldn't have said that thing to that person. I pushed their button and now they're mad at me. It's not because you necessarily meant to push their button, but it's just a pattern you're in, because what you can see as possible is a smaller window out into the world.
Yeah, so that kind of stress activated state actually narrows what we have access to then, be it creativity, resources, solutions, energy. So that's really interesting. I feel like that is, in a sense, a very limiting way to live because it cuts off access to the things that would bring us joy and connection and belonging and all of those things in life. So I guess the $1,000,000 question is, how do we work with that? And how do we work with not being in an activated state all the time? Is that something that we have choice over, control over? And is this something we can work with?
Yeah, we absolutely do have some choice about how we act and where we spend our energy. So, of course, the first thing to do is to notice that you're not spending your energy in the way that you would prefer. And that opens the door to a whole bunch of things you can do about it. I particularly like this kind of work because what it does is it introduces you to how you are actually doing things. Instead of having that in the background, on subconscious, on repeat, where you don't really notice, you start to pay attention to you. And then you can see, oh, I like what I'm doing here. I don't like what I'm doing here so much. Let me do something else instead. So this way of looking at yourself through nervous system regulation not only allows you to see what's happening, it also is a sincere invitation to understand that you are actually amazing. And that even if things aren't going quite the way you want in your life, it doesn't change the fact that you are a lovely being here to experience wonderful things in your life. And that kind of tenderness, when we get to connect to this capacity in ourselves, is very empowering. It really opens that window for a wide view.
Yeah, I can definitely see that as you're describing it. I can even feel that in my body as you're talking about that. I think there's a real difference when we live our lives in contraction versus living our lives in expansion and having that awareness and that access. So that is fascinating when you explain that. How does energy and your work tie into this? Because when we work with the nervous system, of course, there are many different ways and approaches and techniques that people can use to work with that. How does your particular approach figure into working with the nervous system? I'm very curious because when we say energy, people start wondering, what is it that actually gets done in those sessions? So share a little bit with us what that would look like in your work.
We all live inside our own energy fields, right? And this is a little bit like a house that we're in. And the house that we're in is not just a static, dead structure. It's alive. It's part of us. And it wants us to be really comfortable inside it. If you're living in a house and you have the lights turned off, it's hard to see where things are. It's hard not to bump into things. It's hard not to feel a little bit disoriented. So this kind of energy medicine is like going into your house and turning the lights on so you can see what's there and you can see, oh, wow, this house is actually really great that I'm in. It's becoming familiar with the different layers, the rooms, the levels of yourself. And that gives the option to start to change and interact with it.
Yeah, I love that analogy, actually. Turning the lights on, that's great because a lot of us stumble around and we kind of look for the answer for things. Often we don't even think it's inside of us. So that's a really great point. We come back to ourselves. And also a bit of that looking around, just not being able to see because the lights are out. And I have found also in my own personal experience that sometimes it is very hard to turn those lights on yourself. And it does take another practitioner or a person or a guide that we work with to help us turn those lights on a little bit easier. And so I can see how working with you on this would provide that and would be really helpful in coming to that point of reconnection and just finding that space and alignment again. And of course, we all are energy. So this applies to all of us. We can all work on this with you. And what kind of things have you noticed in your clients and in yourself when they start working on this with energy medicine or acupuncture, whichever way you're approaching this with them? What have you started noticing that changes in their lives when they actually begin to work on these things?
Those are two great questions you just asked there. Let me start with the first note about, you know what? Nobody does life by themselves. Sometimes we get caught up in the idea that it's not okay to ask for help. We don't deserve it. We shouldn't bother somebody perhaps. But as communal animals, we really do need each other, and it's okay to want to get to support. I noticed especially a lot of people who are healers have a hard time asking for help, and we can relax into it because we all need help sometimes. But what I notice with people who do this work is they begin to feel expansive within themselves. They begin to start to be able to listen to that inner yes, which is their own wisdom, their own truth, their own authenticity. Because when your nervous system is engaged in a stuck relationship, what that means is maybe you're waiting for somebody to give you that apology you really want, or you're trying to fix them, or you're trying to please them. What that means is you're not acting from a place of your own truth. You are reacting to their truth. So the frequency you're listening to is not yours. And when your inner yes is still there, it's always there. It never goes away, but you just haven't been paying attention to it as you could. So when you start listening to your inner yes, this is really like the navigation system, your own map, your own ability to move through life. When you listen to that inner yes, you learn, oh, this choice over here, if I eat this food, I'm going to feel better than if I eat that piece of chocolate cake. If I say this thing to that person, oh, they're going to actually hear me say it in the way that I mean and not get triggered because they think I'm coming at them, for example. Or, oh, this project that I was interested in that, oh, maybe I don't have the time for, or I don't have the confidence I can do it. Oh, you know what? That would be fun to engage in. And I don't need to put that pressure on myself because I'm genuinely interested. That inner yes is allowing me to approach it rather than hide or run away from it. So all kinds of shifts can happen with this work because your own wisdom will guide you.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of people say that they don't have intuition. So I feel that a lot of us are disconnected from that inner wisdom because we've been taught to stick it out, power through, just get things done. We come from a world where we often don't get encouraged to listen into that inner wisdom. So does the kind of work that you do, this energy medicine and this energy work, does that help us reconnect also with our intuition and find that little voice again through what you just described?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that is definitely like turning on a light in the inner room. That inner wisdom is always there. Your inner yes never leaves you. And it's yours to enjoy. You just have to recognize that, oh, yeah, I get that too. Of course you do.
Yeah. I feel that there are just many things possible when we start working on realigning with ourselves. And as you said, setting some boundaries, sounding into what's actually ours and what's not ours. And there are huge ripples, I think, that can come from this kind of work, be it in our personal lives with how reactive we are emotionally, how we feel mentally. And also, I think there are also big physical shifts possible with this kind of work. Certainly with acupuncture, I've experienced that myself as well. So share a little bit about, I want to say, some of the transformations that you've seen and what kind of things change for people when they are realigning with that inner yes and they're actually operating from this aligned place that they come to.
Yeah, people respond to energy medicine and nervous system regulation in really lovely ways. So I was working with a client recently, let's call her Celine. She was stuck on her last relationship, which had ended a year ago. She wasn't even talking to this guy. They weren't in communication. And it had not been what we would consider a healthy or good relationship. The guy wasn't particularly nice to her. It was the kind of thing where her friends and family were upset at her that she was in it and couldn't really seem to move past it. But she was genuinely stuck. Her nervous system was just frozen and not moving forward at all. And, you know, she wanted to get married and have kids, and she couldn't even bring herself to date anybody. So there was no forward momentum. And her ability to hear her inner yes was a very small window because she was so focused, so attached to this person who wasn't even part of her life anymore. And, you know, what this was a past life issue that she was experiencing. That's when your reaction to or attachment to a relationship is too big for the situation. It doesn't make sense according to what actually happened. We went into her field. We started exploring this. A lot of times it happens when you go into a field, you work through different layers simultaneously. So she had an inner yes issue that was present. She also had this past life loop issue that was present. And so she was really like shrunk into herself. She had pulled her energy in, her energy boundaries were permeable. This man was able to take advantage of her in certain ways, because when you make your energy boundaries permeable like this, it's an invitation for people to come in and take your resources, because you have basically said to them, oh, hey, I'm available and you can take this, because that's what you're telling yourself, is that you're not worth protecting. So lots of things going on in this kind of relationship. But we did some energy work and started to resource her system, started to make her feel stronger, more connected to how she actually was inside. And you know what this enabled her to do is start to reclaim her agency and start to listen to that inner yes, which is so important. So she was able to untangle herself from this pattern that really wasn't serving her. Past life loops can be challenging because they have such huge emotional effects on us. But when they come up, it's actually something that's quite positive, because they're coming up now because you have the maturity to deal with it now. And that is a blessing. So she was able to see that this outsized attachment, although it was coming from a past life and they had a long history together, was something that she had permission to let go of now so she could enjoy her current life. And that was like just taking a weight off of her shoulders. So she was able to consider dating again. She was able to start engaging in her creative activities that she missed so much, but she had just put on the back burner because she just didn't have the energy to do any of these things. And the brightness came back to her eyes. It was really a profound shift.
Wow. I'm just feeling into that as you're describing that. And you know what I find fascinating, Hayley, as you're sharing this, is I am wondering how many of the patterns that we experience are actually from this life or maybe our childhood, but how many are actually related to some other generations or past lives? Because often we follow patterns that make no sense to us. We choose the same bad relationships over and over, and we wonder why we always end up with the same person that doesn't suit us, or why we make certain financial decisions over and over. There's a bit of lack of awareness, I think, in that. And thinking that this could be related to something so much bigger that extends beyond our lifetime is actually a really fascinating perspective on that. I think that could be almost that key where when people come up against these inexplicable things that we keep doing over and over, that could be a really great place to start digging in and seeing maybe there's something overarching that's not just from this life. So thank you for sharing that. What a fascinating insight. I love that.
Oh, the energy field is so interesting because it stores memories, it stores skills, it also stores debits. So turning the lights on in your house and looking at what's there, you can really start to interact with those things. And that really helps you see how you are good at stuff and how you have the capacity to begin to release what you no longer need.
I imagine that frees up a lot of the resources that are being sapped by all of these patterns that no longer serve us, that are just running in the background, taking our energy. So at that point, when we have that internal permission to let that go, I can really see how that could change so many things in our lives and bring us back to center and almost feel like a new person at that point.
Oh, it's so refreshing to let your inner yes resound through your system. I really love to see that when people do that. That's one of my favorite things. That's why I like this job so much.
Yeah. It's reconnecting people with that. Yeah, I feel like there's so much healing in just even doing that piece of becoming aware and then releasing some of those things. Yeah. And of course, as we said before, this ripples into all of this work with the nervous system and these unresolved relationships, because we might think as relationships just with other people, but I feel that we have relationships also with things like monetary relationships, material relationships that affect us as well. I do feel that this kind of work is on every single level that we experience in this life. So hugely important to start looking at that.
Oh, yeah. Relationship is really a word that encompasses such a huge part of our experience. And what's interesting about a relationship is it always ties into emotions, right? And emotions live in our sacral chakra. And the sacral chakra is like a fireplace. It creates a lot of energy that the rest of the system can use to be healthy. But the fuel for the sacral chakra is actually a couple of different things. It's your emotions, it's your physical sensations through your body, and it's your sex drive. And so you can imagine all of these things are like, wow, big. It's big fuel. But just like wood that you want to burn in the fire, if that stuff hasn't been cured and dried and processed, it's not going to light. You can't light wet wood on fire, right? It doesn't matter how many wet logs you put in the fireplace, it's just not going to catch. When it does light up, what happens is that energy rises to the heart and becomes the energy through which we transform our relationship to ourself and the outside world. And so if you're looking for real intimacy, real self-love, real connection, that happens because the heart is really well nourished from the sacral chakra. Also in the sacral chakra, there's a whole bunch of other stuff, right? This is also our relationship to money and finances, because this often ties into our ideas about self-worth. So everything does tie back into our emotions, right? Having a healthy relationship with emotions really allows them to fuel our lives in ways that we like.
Fascinating. I've never heard it explained like that, but that makes so much sense when I think about things in my own life too. So that makes so much sense now that you've said that. And of course, often we don't get taught how to work with emotions, how to regulate through and with emotions. And it's simply often not part of our experience, even as we're growing up, depending on what kind of family dynamic we're dealing with as children. So I feel this is a really important part for people to also learn later on in life, because, as you said, it connects to literally everything else. Do you work with people on regulating emotions and all of these emotional pieces as well?
Oh, absolutely. This is a key part of nervous system regulation in general. Is first of all, you have to accept that you have emotions. Then you have to allow them to speak to you, because really emotions are signposts for us. So they give us information about how we can move forward in ways that make sense. But you're so right. We don't learn this growing up. There's no class that we have in like high school about, oh, this is how you deal with your emotions. What happens is that as adults, when we get kicked around enough by our emotions, eventually we come to trying to work with them. So we need to find the practitioner that we like, or the class, or whatever we decide. And that's when we start to build these really interesting structures that actually nourish us. I wish that we all did this sooner in life, but yeah, why would we? Because it's not around us in the environment. So yeah, I do work a lot on this. And so I talked a little bit earlier about how people can shrink into themselves and they leave their energy boundaries permeable and available to be the energy resources taken by other people. There's kind of another dynamic that's really common when we're not in a healthy relationship with our emotions. And that's what I call the outward armor, as opposed to the inward collapse. So in this outward armor dynamic, you have decided that you are, to a certain degree, not good. So you become harsh and unforgiving with yourself, and you create almost like a little room where you lock your energy, your emotions inside. But the reflection of that is that's also how you interact with the world. It's through this harsh and unforgiving armor where, it's hard to let people in. It's hard to hear them when they're communicating with you. Your filter might see the most negative part of what they say rather than the whole picture. It's hard to say yes to things coming in. your life, it's hard to move forward. And that's because you have locked your resources away into this little room. So this resource that I'm talking about really is like inner love and compassion for yourself. It's grace for yourself. If you're not in touch with this grace for yourself, you cannot offer it to other people. So it can be that we become insensitive to others. And it doesn't mean we're bad or mean people. It just means that we have not allowed ourselves to experience our own resource, and therefore it's hard to share it outwards. Yeah, so that can be another common way that we deal with emotions is we don't want to feel them. We lock them in.
That makes so much sense as well when we talk about chronic stress or trauma or any of those experiences as almost a protection for ourselves as well, to cope with things and to limit that energy, because in a lot of times actually feeling emotions hurt too much. And so we want to protect ourselves from that. So yeah, that's really interesting how that piece connects into what we've been talking about. So thank you for sharing that. And I feel like we've touched on so many different things as we've been speaking, different ways to work with ourselves, different avenues to come back to that inner yes, how to regulate our emotions so that we can become centered and grounded in who we are. And if our listeners are curious about all of this now and they'd like to work with you and get in touch with you, Hayley, what kind of services, programs, resources, what can you offer our listeners?
Yeah, so I do remote or online treatments. So we do not have to be in the same city or the same country or even the same continent to work together. Energy work does not require physical presence. There's different kinds of sessions if you want to work with me. There's a half hour, there's a 1 hour, there's packages. It depends on what it is you're interested in doing. If you just need a quick reset, then the 30-minute session is a good idea. This is for when your nervous system is like saying, oh no, and you're experiencing stress, anxiety, maybe you just got some bad news and you need to come back to center so you can do your day, then that's a good option. If you want to go deeper into yourself with the recalibrate, that's a 1 hour. And this is where we start to look at the patterns that are really in your way. And that gives you the ability to start to change them. And then the packages are for when you're ready to explore and really get back to your grounding, get to your inner yes, and start living your life in a way that makes sense for you. So all of that is available. If you want to work with me, I'd love to offer Jōrni listeners 50% off a recalibrate treatment. The code for that is Jōrni, Jōrni 50. So that's available. And I also have a really great freebie called the Relationship Reset Kit. And this is a 3-part kit. It only takes about 10 minutes, but the first step is a 10-question quiz to see where your nervous system is cycling, is looping around an unresolved relationship. So there's a couple of different main categories. And once you get some information about, this is the main one, could be the past life issue, could be the inward collapse or the outward armor. It could be an inner yes problem. Once you understand what dynamic is your nervous system is running in, then you can start to work with it. The second part of the Relationship Reset Kit is the Energy Reboot. And this is a short audio, a guided transmission to start to bring some energy back into your system, because you need some energy in order to make some change. And then the third part is a really great little technique you can use to start to change the dynamic with somebody that you're in a stuck relationship with. And this is talking with them on the soul level. So you don't have to say a word to them in person. These 3 tools are available on my website in the free tools section.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing those resources. And of course, thank you for your very generous offer of the coupon for our listeners. And I hope all of you take advantage of that, because as I said, had my own experience working just a little bit with Hayley already, and it's been absolutely amazing. So if you are in stuck relationships, if you are feeling that you are running patterns that maybe you don't quite understand where they're coming from, your emotions are all over the place and you feel like could be some regulation there, some space for actually coming into that choice and that inner yes, I just highly recommend that you reach out and connect with Hayley. And we will be linking to all of Hayley's offerings in the show notes, of course, so you can find the information there. And let us know what your experience has been if you end up working with Hayley. I'm always curious to find out what happens with our podcast listeners when they connect with our guests and the resources they offer. So let us know, send us a message, post some comments, and tell us what your experience has been like. And Hayley, thank you so much for being here today and sharing this time with us and giving us insight and sharing your own wisdom on this. I truly appreciate you and your time today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate having this moment with you. Thank you, Petra.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And so much important information on how we can actually make our lives better. And isn't that what it's all about? Finding our thriving, finding that inner joy, that inner yes that you were talking about, and just coming into actually truly and fully enjoying our lives. Thanks everybody for tuning in today, and take care and be well. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.